Okay, well, welcome to another episode of the Rest and Recovery Podcast. With me is Mr. Thomas Hinton. It's a certified in sleep science from the Spencer Institute and sleep improvement of Harvard Health. It's been in the sleep medicine field for over 15 years and founder of Circadian Health. Thomas, welcome to the Rest and Recovery Podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Scott, for having me. Glad you reached out.
Yeah, it's the fun part about the intrawebs is finding like-minded people and seeing and learning from others in the health space, especially in sleep medicine and sleep science space. So I always love learning from other people and especially someone seasoned like yourself. Been in it for a while and doing some great work with people. So great to have you on.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Very passionate about this, and I love talking about it whenever I have the opportunity.
Yeah. So why don't we start, maybe I call Genesis 1-1, kind of your background story on and how you get into sleep medicine, right? Now people are starting to talk about it more, but 13, 15 years ago, it was kind of just back behind the curtain. So how did you kind of get into this space?
Yeah. So to your point, it's still kind of an uphill battle, in our world, but it's definitely, it's come a long way. But usually when people ask me that question, I talk about my why. And my why was my dad. As you know, we talked, I started off in the sleep lab doing sleep studies, dealing a lot with sleep apnea.
Okay.
And so my dad had a heart attack, and died at the age of 35. I was 2.5 years old.
Oh, wow.
And, yeah. And so when I see pictures of him, he was an athlete. He was big, had 19-inch biceps, but it was just like a head on top of some shoulders. There was really no neck. My mom, I remember hearing my mom talk about how he would snore and different things like that.
Yeah.
Sleep apnea can be hereditary, and I have it. And so it was one of those things where I feel, that's what kind of, what caused him to have that cardiac event and ultimately take him out. And so that was my why, and so I got into the field to pretty much, help educate, bring more awareness and educate people on what sleep apnea is, so they don't end up like my dad, so that's really where it started from. But then how I got into doing what I'm doing now in the coaching aspect, is just more so just hearing, there's a big need in the athletic space and also the general in the general population.
Yeah.
Where people aren't sleeping, they're not sleeping that well, and they don't know how to do it. They don't know how to condition their body or their environment on how to do it. And so that's where I come in and say, hey, I can show you and teach you how to do it, but then also hold your hand throughout the process. Because my time, in healthcare has shown me that you can't just give someone a therapy or a plan and just say, hey, I'll see you back in, a couple of weeks or a month. Well, we live in a world of instant gratification and satisfaction that, the first 2 weeks, they don't see any results. I'm done. I'm not doing it anymore. So now they know they have me on the back end to help keep them, consistent and confident and compliant.
Well, I want to say it's great, but it's great to hear of a terrible circumstance you've been able to leverage to help other people. Sorry for you to go through that, but it's good to have that why and that passion and help yourself and others around you. Yeah, and you mentioned kind of the coaching, and that's almost in any medical field, it seems like, is that adherence, the follow through on it. I'll call the New Year's resolution syndrome that we all experienced at some point, and we're mid-February, so I'm sure some people are starting to hit that 6-week mark and fall off, unfortunately, is that we go at it hard and fast, we're good to go, but then we don't have that support or that guidance that someone like yourself can help support through that process.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really good because you start to notice, if some of my clients admit like, oh man, like if I didn't have you, I probably would have quit this time ago because I wasn't seeing anything, because I always tell my clients the first 30 days are the most important because your body needs that time to acclimate to the changes that we're making. So you have to at least give it that much time. And so once they do, and they start saying, oh, wow, okay, he does know what he's talking about, and I always tell people, it always, everybody's body responds differently, so I've had clients who responded well within 2 weeks, and then I've also had clients who didn't see a difference until after 6 weeks.
Hmm.
And so it all everybody's body responds differently. So they have to take that into account and remember that. And so that's where I come in and say, and it's to remind them to say, hey, it's okay. Like let's stay the course. You're doing good. And then I start asking questions. I call them micro wins. And so
Hmm.
I start asking them and say, hey, are you still getting up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night? And they're like, wait a minute, no, I'm not. And I'm like, see, that's a micro win,
Yeah.
so we can
Yeah.
build off of that. So that's a benefit. Like you're already, seeing or experiencing the benefit of what we're doing. And they're like, oh my gosh. And so then next thing you know, that confidence boost, comes up and then they're good to go for another couple of weeks. And next thing you know, they're seeing the difference and
Yeah.
they start doing well.
I like that. I like that. Acknowledging the micro wins. Something I think we often overlook is those little progressions. We're waiting for that Big Bang Theory experience or something like that. Um, so it sounds like a key attribute for you, especially as the coach, is setting expectations um, for the individual, because it whatever got them there probably didn't happen overnight.
Mm-hmm.
How do you level set with them to have that patient persistence?
By making sure they understand why we're doing it. That's my biggest thing is I want to make sure I'm real big on understanding why, how and why sleep directly impacts your athletic, mental, physical performance, recovery, all of that. And I've seen, and heard and even witnessed these horror stories where you have these coaches that are just like, well, I'm the expert, I'm the coach, so just do this because I say so. I
Right.
don't like that model, because they don't really know why they're doing it and they're just kind of going through the motions because you said it. But no, like I want you to understand why we're doing this, and then I'm going to explain to you in different parts, of this process, why we're doing a certain thing, why I want you to create triggers leading up to bed, why I want you to go out and get sunlight in the morning, why I want you to do these things. So then when you start seeing those benefits and these things start happening for you, it's like, oh, the light bulb comes on. Again,
Right.
okay, this Thomas guy might know what he's doing here. And I actually had a client tell me that one time. He was just like, man, like you actually know what you're doing. I'm like, I hope so, you know. But so that's really that's how I get the buy-in, right? I get the
Yeah.
buy-in through my experience, but I also get the buy-in through the benefits that they see, just baby steps. Like I said, micro wins. So once I get them to see one of those micro wins, okay, I'm not getting up to go to the bathroom anymore. That's a micro win. Oh wow, okay, so I can build off of that. Next thing
Mhm.
oh man, like I'm not sleepy during in midday anymore. That's a
Right.
micro win. So all these things leading up to bedtime. I always tell my clients what you do. It's not just about what you do at night. It's what you do the moment that you wake up until you get to that point will impact how your body prepares you for sleep. And so
Yeah.
that's where I get the buy-in.
Yeah, and that's a huge point, I think, in the awareness factor, the acknowledgement factor of, you know, not to overstate some of these things, but they all relate to how you, like you just said, fall asleep and wake up, and there's a connection point, and pulling on those levers can really um, add up over time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's different. Like I said, like and that was just a person I was working with that's non-athlete. Like once you start working with athletes, like it changes a little bit. Because as athletes, I always say we because I played semi-pro football for 7 seasons, and I wish I had someone like me to tell me, hey, like you can't go to every after game party. You know what I mean? But as athletes, we use and abuse our bodies more than the average person or non-athlete. Therefore, our bodies literally require more recovery and repair time, and that happens through sleep. And so that's why the foundation of what I do is solely based on sleep is the foundation. That's what we're doing, but then also we're doing other things as well where that sleep impacts. And so I think you have to cover the whole or I guess you have to paint the whole picture,
Right.
for this thing for it to work. So
Okay. And going back to one of the earlier things you had mentioned was the cognitive aspect of sleep, um, and maybe unpack that a little bit in the correlation between that quality sleep and you know whether it's the everyday athlete, the mom. who's got 3 kids, or the professional athlete, how those things can correlate.
Yeah. So from the cognitive aspect of it, I guess I'll start with the mental health component, because there is a mental health component. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that sleep, mental health, and sleep like have a direct connection.
Yeah.
How you sleep or how you don't sleep will impact your mental health, on the back end. Difficulty controlling mood, depression, anxiety, all these different things. And from the cognitive, aspect of it, another thing that people don't realize is that, it's said that structural damage actually happens in our brains, like when we're using them throughout the day. Right. So like right now, as I'm delivering information to you, you're digesting it, you're thinking of, like, we can't feel it, but like structural damage is actually happening. Like toxins and byproducts are being broken down and deposited in the spaces in our brains. And so when we sleep, this was proven through imaging when someone was sleeping, that at a certain stage of sleep, cerebral spinal fluid, or CSF for short, pulses of it actually like rush in and like kind of power washes our brain, and cleans out all that trash.
Yeah.
And so I tell people, and this is the way I explain it. Obviously, you'll get, I always have to give that disclaimer. You can get 10 other people, that do what I do, and you're going to get 10 different answers or different explanations. But that's why the next day, like, we're more mentally focused and more mentally energized, and have, better awareness. If you're an athlete, your reaction times improved. Your injury, your sorry, I keep my words together here. Your incidence of injury goes down,
Yeah.
because now you're more aware of how you're landing, how you're stepping, how you're falling, different things like that, how you're moving. And so you have to give your brain the chance to again, to kind of clean itself out, so that stuff doesn't get built up,
Yeah.
because then that's when you have delayed reaction times. That's how, the non-athlete, that's how you get into car accidents, because your reaction times are off. And you either hurt yourself or somebody else. So the cognitive component of it is really, really important. And I also go over that as well, with my clients on, brain health. That's huge. That is big.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's more and more awareness on that. I've seen a few articles talking about the tired driving, right? Obviously, we were all familiar with drinking and driving, DUIs, but
Yep.
like the studies, analysis, and reviews of seeing the correlation between, basically tired or exhausted driving is equally as dangerous. And I think I heard, maybe the stat better. I think, one night of less than 6 hours was like equivalent to being under the influence or something like that. And I don't remember the exact number, but it was shocking to me that it really was only 1 or 2 nights of consistent, like over six, and you might as well be having a 6 pack.
Yeah, the last I read, this is when I was in training, so this is way back. But I think it's like 24 hour. If you stay up for 24 hours, it's like the equivalent of like a point zero 0.08 alcohol level,
Okay.
which is crazy.
Yeah.
And I've actually done it, not on purpose, but this was when I was working third shift doing sleep studies, and I was going to go see my mom down in Arkansas, and my best friend was coming with me. So I worked a 13-hour shift, got off work, went and got the rental car, picked him up, and then drove another 7 hours, to my, to mom's.
Yeah.
And we get there, and I thought something ran across the road, and so I was like, whoa, and I hit the brakes. And I was like, did you see that? And he's like, see what? And he was like, no, he's like, dude, pull over, man, I'm taking over.
Yeah.
Because I was so hyped up on going to see my mom, that I was, I guess it didn't take effect yet, but I was hallucinating,
Wow.
at that point. He's like, nothing ran across the road, dude. He was like, just pull over and let me take over, and we're good to go. And I really shouldn't have been driving anyway, to be
Right.
honest with you. In like hindsight, we were in our early 20s. But yeah, I mean, it's a real thing, and people don't realize that until something happens, and it's like, oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
you know, yeah, and
Yeah.
then it's too late.
Yeah. Well, thankfully, it ended the way it did. You had your friend to kick you out
Yeah,
of the driver's seat.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty interesting. Brain fog is the term, I'm sure many folks have heard. I've definitely experienced it plenty of times. We were talking offline, my own story of just sleep deprivation over time. And, you know, you power through it. Our body's an amazing thing.
Hmm.
That it's designed to survive. And so it
Right.
can hover down. And it's interesting to try and get that correlation between, um, the slow boil of the frog, I guess, in the negative direction. And I
Hmm.
think we were even talking offline a little bit on the positive side of it is like we don't acknowledge the wins, those micro wins over time, or the losses for that matter. And
Yeah.
that aggravation over time, you just become comfortable or used to feeling, and that's just quote unquote normal.
Yeah. And so, and I see that a lot in clinic, where, patients come in or even clients come in with my business, and they think that how they're functioning and operating on limited sleep is normal, right? Or sometimes they don't know that they're getting limited sleep. They just think that how they're feeling is normal. Oh, I get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, get ready for work. By 10 a.m., I'm ready to take a nap and fall asleep again. That's not normal. That's not supposed to happen that way. Um, but another thing too, is that they don't realize what what that sleep deprivation does, mentally and physically, internally. From again cognitive component, cardiovascular, stroke, neurological, blood pressure, comorbidities, all these different things. They don't realize that all this like it adds up. And
Yeah.
so sleep deprivation is not one of those things that like it impacts you like right away. It chips away at you. Little by little, chips and chips and chips, and then finally, one day your body's like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
And then you either have a heart attack or a stroke, or a minor stroke, or whatever happens to you, or if you have any existing or pre-existing diseases in your body, it exacerbates that.
Yep.
And so they don't know that, and so they come in and they hear these things, and it's like, oh my gosh, I had no idea what I was doing to myself.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's almost like a badge of honor sometimes to be able to, oh well, I can survive off of 4 hours of sleep every night. And it's kind of like oh man, but then on the back end, they start falling apart, and they don't attribute that to the 5 or 6 years they've been operating on 4 hours of sleep. They just act like whatever is happening to them just fell out of the sky.
You're right.
And it's like, no, like it didn't just fall out of the sky. Like you've been beating yourself down for 5 or 6 years on 4 hours of sleep, a night, because you like to brag about it, and now you're paying the price for it.
Exactly.
That's how it works.
Yep.
And so it's just trying to get people to understand. We live in such a see it first world, where we have to see it first before we do anything about it,
Yeah.
that it's hard to try to get people to buy into, hey, if you do these things now, it'll prevent. So I'll give you an example if you don't mind. I'll give you an example. So one of the doctors that I work for, he has MS, right? And he's been managing it, since he was diagnosed in his early 20s. And it's funny because he takes he takes what's called a biologic, an injection to help with it. And so when people ask him, oh, like, do you think, do you think it works? Do you think it's helping? And he jokes and says, I don't know. You know what I mean? He's like, because I don't know what life would be like without it.
Right.
I really
Yeah.
don't know. You know, so it's kind of one of those things, where it's just like, if you implement these good sleep hygiene practices, you'll never know whether or not you know it didn't work for you, especially if you don't have any issues. Apparently, it's doing something.
Yep.
So I don't know. It's just kind of my roundabout way of explaining it to people sometimes. Where it's like, don't wait until your body, kind of like that engine light comes on in your body. Then you're like, oh, I got to do something. Oh,
Yeah.
well, you should be doing things already to prevent that from happening. But it's hard
100%.
to get through to people when they have to see it first in order to do something about it.
Yeah. I mean, you pretty much just described my past self. Um, but yeah, and it's like that's the challenge, I guess, going back to the micro wins and really being able to amplify those types of things and illuminate those because you don't see those little things over time
Mm-hmm.
and you don't know until you stop, right?
Right.
That thing, which you don't want them to do, but I wonder if that's even a tactic to apply just to see that, hey, the progression you've had and like, yeah, you still feel tired. Like, how do you manage that? The expectation of the feeling of tiredness, because especially early on, like any good recovery process, sometimes you feel worse before you feel better,
Yeah.
whether it's, food issues or recovery from, injury. So how do you navigate that when it comes to working with folks?
Just making sure that they're mindful of what they're doing, of like their lifestyle choices and what they're doing. So I have a lot of examples. So for example, I have a decathlete, that I've been working with since 2020, and with USA Track and Field. And I remember this was the Super Bowl, 2021 Super Bowl. And he texted me, and he's like, "Hey, my family, I'm at my parents' house. Like, can I stay up and watch the Super Bowl?" I'm like, "Yes, yes, that's fine. You can watch the Super Bowl." I'm not one of those coaches where I'm just like, "You can't do anything." It's not always going to be perfect,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
right.
I'm very, I'm pretty. I mean, I hold you accountable, but I'm pretty easy with certain things. But it's not always going to be perfect. I was like, yes, yes, watch the Super Bowl. I said, but just be mindful that tomorrow when you go to train, you're not. It's not going to be good.
Yes.
You're going to be crashed, right?
Yeah.
Because you're going to have what's called fatigue misperception. So because of your sleep deprivation, you're going to feel more tired, or the your training or your exercise or whatever you're doing is going to feel like it's way more exhausting than what it really is any other time. That's fatigue misperception. I said, so you're going to have that. So just know that you're not going to you're not going to do well tomorrow. He was like, okay. And sure enough, we had our follow up. He goes, man, and he was like, I didn't do well at all during training. I'm like, he's like, I was just overly. It's like I just got tired a lot quicker than what I normally do.
Yep.
It was, and I was like, yeah, like, I was like, I'm not mad at you because I told you, yeah, go ahead, watch the Super Bowl. Obviously with their friends and family, but you knew that the next day because I told you that it wasn't going to work out for you as well. And that for him, that's when the light bulb came on. Like, oh man, I didn't realize just that one night of doing that will cause this.
Yeah.
So that caused even more buy-in from him. I mean, he trusted me, but it just kind of like, oh wow, okay, then now I see how this works.
Yeah.
And so he was very mindful of the things that he was doing late at night and how late he was staying up. Obviously, I never push back on when family's in town or whatever. You want to see your family. If you're on vacation, like I don't even want to talk to you when you're on vacation because
Yeah.
my ears are going to bleed if I hear how your sleep schedule is. But when they get back, then I kind of help them reset, and go from there. But sorry, I get long-winded, so interrupt me. But in a long-winded way, like that's kind of how I get them to understand the whole tired thing. Is like we go from where you were when we first started talking to where you are now, and then obviously like and something happens where you're on vacation or whatever it is. Hey, how'd you feel? How'd you do? Oh my gosh, like I feel terrible. Okay, that's how this works.
Right. No, I think those are important nuances to understand. And I really like the part on the mindset. And again, I think setting expectations is such a huge element. Um, so that most of us probably go negative, right? When it's not meeting our expectations. But if you walk in
Mhm.
having an expectation, okay, I'm going to feel like a bad guy. You know what? I've either got to grin and bear it, and it's an opportunity for perseverance, or for most, he's a professional. But I guess for us, everyday athletes, right, family men,
Mhm.
moms and dads out there, you know, similar example. I stay up Super Bowl, but I'm going to the gym on Monday.
Yep.
What's another tactical approach for the everyday athlete? Um, is it grin and bear it and go through the exercise, or do you tweak the level of effort and intensity?
So it all depends on the person, and so that's why what I do is so customized, because I get to learn. I like to learn who someone is as let's say I'm working with someone that's a workout warrior, you know what I mean, but they're like an executive, for a firm or something like that. Well, I want to know who you are as the executive, in the firm. But then I also want to know who you are as the workout warrior because those are two different people.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how I go about customizing what I want them to do. So if I know for a fact, you're a go getter and like nothing can get in your way and stop you or whatever it is, okay, fine. You stay up for the sewer. Let's say you stay up, and have an all night or whatever you're doing, and you want to go work out the next day. You can still go work out the next day, but I want you to know that it's not gonna look like the way it always has. You're not gonna feel the way you always have, when you after like you get a good night's sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So just be mindful of that. You're not going to have as much, like force or propulsion or energy or strength that you did before,
Yeah.
until you reset. But still go ahead and do that and get that workout in, because now what's going to happen on the back end later on that night your body's going to be ready for sleep more.
Yeah.
Because when you exercise, that boosts the melatonin and the serotonin and different things like that. And so no, still go and do that workout, but we're still going to tweak as we go along, and we're still going to reset as we go along. So no, I'm perfectly, and that's just in my experience.
Yeah.
You might get something from somebody different. They may say, "Oh no, I want them to do this instead." But it's all based on who I'm dealing with. So if I were talking to you and you're like, "Yeah, I was up until 2 o'clock in the morning. Wife and I went to a thing or whatever it is. But man, I don't know if I want to go work out tomorrow." Well, if you don't want to, then don't. But if you're going to, okay, fine. Let's talk about that. Just know that you're going to suck tomorrow.
Yeah.
Like still, if you're going to do it, still do it, and you're going to suck tomorrow. But it's also going to help you on the back end later on that night, for when your body starts that preparation for sleep. So, again, it just all depends on who you're talking to.
Yeah, yeah. I guess that personalization of knowing yourself and your client, if you're the type of person that, like you're saying, maybe wave off and that might be the right thing, or lighten the load because you don't want to lose that routine of getting up in the morning and all that, compounding the negative interest of like
Yep.
having.
And then also too, another point too, Scott, if you don't mind, I mean to cut you off,
No,
but
go ahead.
also injury prevention. So like if you're planning on doing like a really hard workout and you're
Right.
sleep deprived, like you said, I would tone that down a little bit, and or not do it at all, because when you're obviously when you're sleep deprived, like again, reaction times are off. You're not really focused on what you're doing, and you can step wrong, you can push on something wrong.
Yeah.
Like your muscles are tired and fatigued. They're not ready. They're not prepared for for the trauma that you're going to put it through. And so
That's a
yeah,
great point.
so yeah, so because injury prevention is really big for me as well. How you sleep directly impacts, again, like how you're stepping, how you're landing, how you're moving. And so, again, we want to decrease occurrence of injury, but also recurrence of injury. So I think that's important as well. But no, I agree with you on that one. It would be a good idea to either to tone that workout down, and or just kind of reset until the next day.
Yeah.
But some people you can't tell that to. Some people just can't. I've got clients where it's just, even though I'm a huge benefit for them, they're still just like, hey, like this is what I can control, and this is my way, so I'm going to do it that way. I'm like, all right, fine, that's what you're going to do. Just know that this might happen, or this is going to happen, and then we move on from there. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's good guidance. At the end of the day, you're also working with adults. They're going to make decisions.
yep.
And we all got to live through the consequence, regardless of whichever end that ends up in.
Yeah. And so another point that you made, is just talking to the average person, the average mom, dad. It's also, this also impacts your patients, if you have a family, how quick triggered you are, with your kids and with your wife or your husband, or whatever, your partner, whatever you have. But also the workplace, sleep impacts performance in the workplace as well. And I talk to, businesses all the time. I do presentations for them and say, hey, this is how sleep on the, negatively and positively, how it affects your performance in the workplace. It affects, your, how you engage with your, with your coworkers, with your bosses, with your, with your constituents. It impacts, how you perform. It impacts your ideas. It impacts, I think there's a study out that showed that when you prioritize your sleep, like you have a much higher chance of getting a raise, because you're being productive.
Oh,
You're
wow.
getting done. You have good ideas. Like you're engaging. You're a team player. All these different things. You're able to manage stress, better. Because your cortisol is more balanced. When you're sleep deprived, your cortisol is off. If you don't have a set bedtime or wake up time, your cortisol is off, because your body needs to know when it needs to start the process of waking you up while you're still asleep, of
Yep.
increasing your cortisol levels. That's what happens. When people don't realize, and I talked about this. I did a little some content stuff for a betting company that I partnered with, and I did a thing on coffee and sleep. Okay, and so what I talked about is that when you're still asleep and your body is starting that process of waking you up, your cortisol levels start to increase. And so when you wake up, things about 45 minutes to an hour after you wake up is when your cortisol levels peak.
Okay.
Well, cortisol also aids as it's a wake promoter as well. So it promotes wakefulness. And so when people drink coffee, before your cortisol levels peak, like you kind of cut in line of that natural waking up process, so now you get that big boost, and then you crash. Um, so just different nuances and different things like that, I talk about. I mean, it's an art and a science, like you
Yeah.
really got to peel the onion back, and that's why, when I'm talking to people, I'm doing the consultations, I'm really diving deep into, like their lifestyle. Like, what are you doing? What are you not doing? You know, um,
The
how are you working?
personalization.
Yeah, when are you working out? When are you eating? How are you eating? Are you doing protein? Like all these different things that sleep impacts, or that is impacted by sleep. Both, that really matters.
Yeah, and it, it, it's interesting the bidirectional relationship, and I really like what you said before on sleep being the foundation and build everything off of that, and that sets the solid footing. And then obviously there's interrelations like you just mentioned to the hormones, to the mental, cognitive, emotional aspects, and you just hit on nutrition,
Yep.
protein. Maybe let's pull on that thread a little bit in that sleep and nutrition connection point. Um, and not just the what, but the when.
Yeah. So when it comes to protein, so when I'm dealing with athletes or non-athletes that work out, um, they don't realize that when you're working out, you deplete your protein storage. Okay. And so I usually have my clients do like a protein shake or whatever they want to use it, whether they do it through food or they do it through a shake, whatever they want to do. I have them replenish about an hour before bed, because what happens is when you sleep, your body breaks down protein into amino acids, and those amino acids work in conjunction with growth hormone. Okay. And so I bring that up and they're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. I mean, this is a professional ad. Like, I had no idea. Even the general population, I had no idea. I'm like, that's fine. Like, unless you do what I do, or unless you're in the nutrition, like, you wouldn't know that.
Yeah.
That's why, that's why people like me exist, and nutritionists and dietitians and different things like that. And that's just what I do for my clients. Obviously someone can do something different. But that's what I do. And I've only had positive, um, results with that,
Mm-hmm.
with clients, with what I'm doing with them.
Yep.
So that's really, really important as well. Um, in terms of like other nutrition, I don't dive too much into that. Really, for me, it stops with like protein intake.
Yep.
In terms of like other foods that you can eat, that's not my wheelhouse. So I don't want to pretend that it is.
Yeah.
But I just focus really more so, I'm really focused on like this muscle rebuilding, muscle repair, regeneration, different things like that. And so protein is part of that. And there's probably more to it than that. Again, that's just not my, that's out of my range there on that one.
Yeah.
That's probably something I should probably look into. But yeah, I'm not afraid. I'm not one of those. I'm not afraid. If I don't know, I don't know.
Well, and
I
it's good to have those boundaries, man. I mean, and just knowing where, and then I guess in that moment, it's more, partners and the community of other healthcare professionals
yep.
to connect with on having those more in-depth skills. Because, like you were saying with your clients, they're like, "Oh, I didn't know that part related to sleep." We all have those areas, including
Yep.
myself. So, but yeah, protein, it seems, is the number one thing to do. I like that idea of having a little bit of protein, because a lot of people have late night snacks and often lean towards more of the carb stuff, which is definitely
Yeah.
not. Leaning into that protein to help that natural process of recovery at night.
Yep. And like I said, like I've only had positive, results from that. All the athletes that I've worked with that are doing that, they're people have started noticing, oh man, like your body looks different. Like what have you been doing? Oh, I've been adding protein now, an hour before bed, and blah, 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 so like so that's really, and then I hear that and it makes me feel good, because it
Yeah.
just kind of reaffirms to myself, like, okay, I think I got it. I know what I'm doing here.
Yeah.
But yeah, it really, really helps. I do it. It's really, really helped me. I'm 37 years old, and I don't rebuild like I used to. You know, and so that's another reason why the prioritization of your sleep is important, because as we age, our sleep naturally starts to deteriorate. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, so people don't know that growth hormone is released. The bulk of growth hormone is released during stage 3 sleep. I think it's like 75% or more of that is released during stage 3 sleep, which is the stage of sleep that children spend the most time in, which is why sleep is very important for their mental and physical growth and development. Um, But in your 20s, I mean, your sleep is still very intense and rejuvenating. And so as you age, that stage 3 sleep goes down, starts to decrease.
Yeah.
And so that's why prioritizing it is important, because we go through different uh not stages of sleep. We go through different stages of sleep. I'm trying to think of the word cycles. We go through different sleep cycles. I think our body goes through about 4 or 5 sleep cycles a night. So what I mean by sleep cycles is you start off awake, you transition to stage 1, then 2, then 3, then 4 is REM. Some may argue that 5 is REM, but there's a big back and forth battle in the sleep world with that. But really, I'm still with 4 stages. So you wake, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 being REM. And so you hit REM, and then you cycle back again. You may not wake up, you just may cycle back to stage 1, 2, 3, 4. So you do that 4 times a night. And so by prioritizing that, trying to get the most out of those sleep cycles really, really helps you, whether you just work out, if you're an athlete, or even if you don't do anything, like, sleep is helpful for everybody. It doesn't matter what you're doing.
Yep.
But if you can maximize, get as many of those sleep cycles in as you can, that's really, really beneficial. That's the quantity side of it. But then you look at the quality, so let's say you go through, those 4 sleep cycles, but then the quality of your sleep is bad. You haven't really done anything, so you gotta do quality, and quantity.
Yeah, it's funny. I've gotten into conversations and in that debate of either or. It's both and. It
Mm-hmm.
sounds like is really the key.
Yeah, I mean, look at LeBron. I mean, if you look at LeBron James, Tom Brady, like their sleep schedules are like storied, which
Yeah.
I know is part of the reason why, they've been able to play as long as they have, is because they prioritize those things. They prioritize their body.
Yeah.
So it's what they put in their body, but then it's also, obviously, when you sleep, that's where the distribution of those nutrients and different things and oxygen and stuff, like that's where all that happens.
Yep.
So what you take in is great, but really your body gets the most benefit when it has the time, when everything else inside, is healing, and repairing itself. And when your digestive system is not active, then it's like, okay, cool, like I can start putting this here, putting that there. And so that's what's really allowed, them to really play as long as they have. Genetics plays a factor as well, but how you take care of your body is really important when it comes to longevity, in your sport, whatever you're doing in life.
Yeah.
Um, it is.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I got to find the source and I add it to the notes. But I remember reading something and they were talking about along those lines, especially for professional athletes,
Mm-hmm.
talking about the longevity. And, the average NFL player, I think, is like 4 or 5 seasons.
Yeah.
So it's a
Yeah.
young man's game. But that's also like you're not going to leave there and go somewhere else and make the same kind of money. So it's like
Right.
you can really squeeze as much juice out of that time frame, and get an extra season, an extra year contract.
Yep.
That's significant financial benefit. So in going to an individual like yourself, a coach, that seems like a great ROI in working with somebody like yourself to kind of get that longevity piece, and that correlates to the corporate athlete.
Yeah.
What most of
Yep.
us in having a good professional career and being excellent at our jobs and or whatever that is, whether it's corporate, mom, dad, etc. So
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Once you start, you just have to start. Because there's still that big misconception about sleep. It's like, oh, I'll just catch up on it, or I'll just no, like it starts with prioritizing it. And once you start doing that, you start seeing the benefits, and it opens up your eyes, opens up a whole new world for you, really.
yeah,
But again, I always tell people it's one of the most important functions of the body that we as a society take the most for granted. You
it's
know,
the first thing that goes
yep,
in the name of the things that we're trying to achieve that sleep actually helps the most, like productivity and athletic performance and all the things, right?
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I'll tell you. So there's a local company locally here where I'm at. I started working with their CEO, and I got him in a program, and got him going, and he started doing really well, responding to it. And we are doing some other things as well. He had some other issues, so I had different modalities that I was doing with him, but got him where he's no longer like at dinner time. He was like, oh man, like I still have energy at dinner time. Oh man, like I'm energized at work. I remember one time he told me, he said that at lunchtime, around lunchtime, he fell asleep at his computer in his office.
Oh
And
wow.
next thing you know, he wakes up and it was like a whole hour went by, you know, and he's got people that are looking at him for direction, different people.
Yeah.
And so he was kind of lacking on proposals and contracts and different things. It was just taking him so long because he was so tired and sleepy that he was making mistakes, and then once had energy, he was going, oh my gosh, why did I? So then he had to go back and fix his mistakes,
Hmm.
you know,
So now it's
and
double
so
work, or
double work.
if the proposal doesn't get out the door, did you miss thousands or millions of dollars of revenue?
Exactly. And so I got him on program and I got him when he was in tip top shape. And so anything happened. Now his revenue went up, because now he's pumping these things out. He's like, oh man, what about this? He's thinking all these cool ideas. And
Yeah.
so he's like, wow. So if one person can do this, what would happen if 4 or 5 of my other employees started prioritizing this? What would that look like in terms of
Right.
revenue,
Right.
and ROI and different things like that? And so I ended up working with two more of his employees, and revenue went up again. So it's just one of those things. It's like, oh, light bulb, you know what I mean? But also how you prioritize your tasks. So I would ask people, I would try to figure out what their chronotype is. So I do what's called a chronotype assessment.
Hmm.
Um, like when does your body want to go to sleep? When does it want to wake up? And then when are you most productive? So I asked him, I said, what do you like? What part of the day are you most productive? And he's like, oh, I'm probably from 8 a.m. until about 1:30 or 2. Great. Schedule the most important tasks of the day. I mean, I guess they're all important, but like the most important ones,
Yeah.
schedule those in between that time that you're most productive. And then like the auxiliary stuff, you can just kind of coast through that. And that's really when he started seeing the jump in productivity and revenue. That's when he was prioritizing the stuff in that time frame when he was most productive. And so I think as a society, we have to do that as well.
Yep.
We have to be mindful of that, and I think businesses have to be mindful of that as well. Because we live in this. I come from a generation where it was like you don't ask questions, like you do what you're told.
100%.
Like you don't push back at leadership. You just do it. Like you burn the midnight oil and you just keep going. And that's shifted now. With this new generation, they're more mindful of, no, I'm gonna do what I can do in this time frame. When I'm most productive. And then I'm done, and then I'm just gonna just kind of do some auxiliary stuff on the back end. And that shifted now. And I think my generation and some of the older, like they're like losing their minds because they're like, what? You can't do that. I worked for 60 hours. You know what I mean? And it's just like
Hmm.
it's the world's changed now. People are more aware of what their bodies can do.
Yeah.
And when to stop.
Yep. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm a little bit older than you are, and I feel like I'm stuck in the middle of like wrestling with the two cultures in my own mind for myself.
Yeah.
Is you've got that old school mentality, and how do we leverage that type of character, but
Mm-hmm.
reclaim, I think, the misguided approach of like burning the midnight oil, be, because I guess at the end of the day, if the middle ground would be if you're knocking out your sleep, the 40 hours should be more productive than the 60,
Yep.
because you're probably dipping in the 60 because you're exhausted and it's taking longer to get something done.
Yep.
And then it just compounds negatively. And all the other things we talked about the last 45 minutes can negatively influence all of that. And none of it's worth your health. I mean, I'm all for commitment
Yeah.
to my family. You're wise, that's why we work. But at the same time, if it I think we are becoming aware of if it's becoming a detriment to your health,
Mm-hmm.
there has to be a line. The work's going to be there tomorrow.
Yep.
And so roll on, go to bed.
Yeah. Well, you can get more done that way. I mean, I associate it with, you've seen like the movies and different things where it's just like there's a project done, and Johnny's in the office, when no one else is there, he's there when the cleaning person's there, you know what I mean, and he's up until 1, 2 o'clock in the morning trying to finish this project, and then the next day he's having to go back and fix his mistakes,
Yep.
but those mistakes are masked as new ideas, right? Like, oh, how about this one? But really, he's fixing the mistakes that he was making because he was tired.
Yep.
And so then like a week later, he gets the project done and everyone's like, oh, good job, Johnny. Well, this dude here stayed up, for 5 nights a week till 2 o'clock in the morning to get this done. And it was like a badge of honor when like his health took a hit. And
Mm-hmm.
really, he probably could have had that project done within 3 or 4 days, You know what I mean? If he would have
Yeah.
just if he just would have stopped, went home, got some sleep, came back the next day, and then knocked it out. But that's where the disconnect, lives there.
Yeah.
And I tell people all the time, like, it's going to be there tomorrow. Trust me, it will be.
Yeah, whether it's that one or another alligator, it's gonna come up.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's definitely a culture shift of, and I think we're getting there, but trying to retrain the brain, which that's what your practice is helping do, but is retrain the brain of, I heard this in other forms, but um, slow is smooth, smooth is fast.
yep,
And it's that same idea. And I'm a runner, so another corollary that I've been using is what's known as the Maffetone method, and
hmm
it's 80% of your running should be almost too slow, right? And you're doing 80% of that, and that's going to actually make you faster in an
yeah,
endurance. And it's just counterintuitive. It totally messes with your head. It's like, no, I need to be intense and like busting it. And the intensity level isn't it.
yeah,
Consistency is better, and that
yep,
correlates directly to sleep.
absolutely. The more consistent you are, the better you'll feel, and the better you'll perform as well.
Huge. Kind of coming up on time. So let me ask you this: what's maybe two or three immediate action items that folks listening can apply consistently uh, to try and start to reclaim their sleep?
Yeah. So one of the things that I do, is have a set bedtime and a set wake up time. Tweaking that alone sometimes makes a huge difference, because again, your body needs to know when needs to start, producing, increasing cortisol and decreasing cortisol, and other hormones as well. So have a set bedtime and a set wake up time, and be consistent with that. That alone makes a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. Um, do a 30-minute wind down. So if let's say your bedtime's at 10 o'clock, at 9:30, no electronics, no screen time, TV, anything like that. Find something to do within that 30 minutes that's relaxing, because your body needs to bring itself down. Okay. And then the last 5 to 10 minutes of that period is finished off in the sleep environment, because again, you want to create triggers that your body and your brain recognize leading up to bed. So therefore that transition into relaxation and sleep is a lot more easier and a lot more pleasant. So do a 30-minute wind down before bed, breathing exercises, reading, whatever, just no screen time. And do this outside of the sleep environment. So then when you enter that, it's like, okay, well, when Scott enters here, this is what we do. We go to bed. um and really develop a pre-bedtime routine. Again, just create triggers along the way. And again, these start, when you wake up, until that evening time. Get out and get sunlight, because your eyes feed that information to your brain, and it monitors the day. Your brain does, or your eyes do, when it feeds that information to your brain. So
Yeah.
when it starts to get dark, okay, we got to start preparing for sleep. So just pre-bedtime routine, 30-minute wind down period, and have a set bedtime and wake up time. Try those three things, and see how that works for you.
Awesome. Well, Thomas, thanks for all the insights. Thanks for what you're doing. Before we do close out, though, I will ask a few hot seat questions. Nothing too
Mm-hmm.
heavy.
Yeah.
So, what are you reading right now?
I am reading a book called How to Sleep. I can't think of the author right now, but it's a book that I got from Barnes and Noble. But it's called How to Sleep. I think it's called How to Sleep Better. So I'm reading that right now. I'm constantly reading stuff, just to build my knowledge more.
Yeah.
Again, like, I know I don't know everything, and I'm fine with that. But I'm always looking to better serve my clients better. So yeah, I'm reading that right now. Um, yeah, I can't think of the author right now, but it's called How to Sleep Better.
Cool. All right. What is your go-to? Hold on. What are you listening to right now, be it music or podcast?
Um, I'm not listening to anything right now, podcast wise. Like, I'll go on them, I'll talk
Yeah.
on them, but I don't really listen to them too much.
Yeah.
And music wise, currently what's on my phone is Maroon 5 right now.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. So, what is your go-to rest and recovery method?
Rest and recovery method. So I use a sleep hoodie that I put on. It helps regulate body temperature, and
Yeah.
so I put that on every night because I run hot naturally, and
Hmm.
so I put that on, and I tell you what, man, it makes a world of a difference.
Who's
It really, really.
the who's the maker? Is that?
So it's a company called Deep Sleepwear.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
know.
so I
Yeah.
actually I'm a partner. I'm a partner with them, and they got me on board with it a couple years ago, and I haven't taken it off. You know, when I go to bed, I put it on every night.
Oh, do you really? Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. All my clients get one.
That's awesome. Yeah, I got one. Met is it Glenn.
Yeah,
Um,
Glenn.
yeah, met him at an event in Boston last year.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, great stuff.
Oh yeah.
Awesome. Well, Thomas, again, thank you so much. How can folks find you for some coaching support?
Yeah. So you can find me on Instagram. It's at th sleep coach on Instagram. You can reach me. You can go on my website www.circadianhealth.org. You can find me there. Drop me an email. My phone number's on there. Text me. Email me. Call me. Whatever it works for you. And let's have the conversation.
Cool. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you.
All right. Thanks, Scott. You have a good one.
Okay.
All right.